In the 1900s until the end of the 1940s, I was an engineer on the ET and WNC Railroad, aka the East Tennessee and West North Carolina Railway in North Carolina. I was specifically divisioned in North Carolina, and my prime locomotive was the number 11. There was one story, though, that I have to tell about this railroad that I dare not have ever spoken of until now. Back in 1949, just 2 days before the railroad was due to close, I was running the 11 around the yard, shunning cars to get ready to pull the train the next day down to Cranberry. The next morning, we backed the engine up to the train and departed the town. We arrived at Cranberry about 2 hours later, and then uncoupled so we could turn the train around. We then hooked up again to the train and headed back down to Johnson City. After we got back to Johnson City, we shunted cars around for other locomotives such as number 12, number 9. 11, 9, and 12 around this time were around the only locomotives operating at this point. The one locomotive that never was made that scared us all to the core was number 13. 13 was going to originally be the third locomotive in the 10-wheeler class. 13 was never made due to the ET and WNC finding out later on that the 13 was an unlucky number. A lot of crew members would say they saw a ghost engine at night and it donned the number 13. But at the time, I didn't believe any of the ghost tales. It wasn't until this experience that I began to believe them. This night was like any other at first. We were sitting in Cranberry with the locomotive just sitting there. And then all of a sudden we heard chuffing coming down the yard. I cautiously walked over to the tracks to look around. There was not an engine in sight. I was kind of uneased by this, but I let it slide. Then a whistle began to blow. It was much deeper and much more hollow than anything I'd ever heard. I looked over to where the noise was coming from to see a 10-wheeler locomotive. This locomotive was unlike the others. It had a glowing ore coming from it, and it donned the number 13. My heart sunk. How was this possible, I thought? Number 13 was never built. The engine stopped next to the tracks, and an engineer got out, and he was named C. Doss. "Excuse me, sir," said the engineer, "but do you happen to know where the train is?" I somehow managed to get myself to help him direct himself to the train. The engine backed up to the consist and actually took off with it. I wasn't going to let this slide, and I chased after the train in my car. I got over to the downtown Cranberry trestle. Nothing. Around 5 in the morning, though, I heard that same dreaded chuffing again, and that deep whistle began to blow slowly. That dreaded whistle. It was so deep and haunting, I'd never heard anything else like it. It howled like a demon, echoing through the valley of Cranberry. The locomotive slowly creeped over the trestle. I looked over at the engine as the engineer was waving at me. What made it even scarier was I blinked and the entire locomotive and the chuffing was gone. I was so shaken up, I drove down to Cranberry and reported my experience. For the next 2 weeks, there was an investigation. and they found 6-inch Crosby 3-chime laying against the track. This whistle was never seen on that same area before. It had looked like it had been there for years. We flipped the whistle over to see the numbers 13 carved into the side of the whistle. I knew that was the whistle I heard that night. That whistle was so haunting, I could never get it out of my head. I'm just glad I finally retired after that. I think I'm safe now. About 20 or so years passed, and I decided to ask local townspeople that used to live there if they had heard a deep-sounding whistle. No one could ever recall hearing one as deep as I could describe, except one person. It was Jacob Doss. I asked him if he had heard a deep Crosby 3-chime near the trestle. He said all he could hear was chuffing and a deep-sounding, gargly-sounding 3-chime whistle echoing through the valley. I asked him to describe the sound, and he said that the whistle slowly began to creep open until it reached its fullest power, and then the whistle began to slowly quiet down just as slowly as it opened up. This sent goosebumps down my spine. What I saw that night wasn't just fake. It was a genuine ghost sighting of the engine number 13. Whatever I saw that night wasn't good. I hope I never have to experience anything like that again.